I've been on that bench a long time, people. I've seen arrogance, I've seen stupidity, I've seen cruelty, but let me tell you something. That day when Marcus Big Ray Sullivan waddled into my courtroom with 400 pounds of entitlement and 47 rental properties built on human misery, that room had never seen anything like the pure, unfiltered contempt dripping off that man. I'm sitting on the bench, watching him squeeze himself into the defendant's chair, cheap polyester suit about to surrender, smug little grin on his face like this was just another free commercial for his slum empire in Detroit's poorest neighborhoods. I could see it in his eyes. He thought he was going to turn my courtroom into marketing material. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I asked him a simple question about illegal evictions. Simple, straightforward, and out of his mouth comes this gem. Listen, lady, I didn't come here to be lectured by some old broad who's never run a real business. Old broad, in my courtroom, on national television, the silence that dropped after that. You could feel it. The air changed. The audience froze. My eyes narrowed into what people like to call the death stare. I've watched fully grown attorneys practically melt under that look. But what happened next? Even I know it became something else. It turned him from a neighborhood tyrant into the most hated landlord in America. Those next 4 minutes. People still talk about them. They went around the world, over 85 million shares, hashtag slumlord justice trending for 8 days straight. 8 days. But here's the part the internet clip doesn't fully tell you. Marcus didn't just lose his case. He didn't just get embarrassed. What I did to him in that courtroom was so brutally honest, so righteously furious, that it ended his entire rental empire, triggered federal investigations, and made him the poster child for predatory landlords. In this country, he walked in that day absolutely convinced he was untouchable. And why not? For 23 years, he'd been king of the slum rentals in Detroit, buying up cheap properties, doing the bare minimum, and stuffing desperate families into places that violated every housing code in the book. I've read the files. I know what he did. Broken heat in Michigan winters while toddlers shivered under thin blankets, black mold crawling through bedroom walls, babies and children ending up in emergency rooms with respiratory infections, rats the size of cats running through bedrooms where infants slept, lead paint peeling into cribs, poisoning kids with brain damage that would follow them their whole lives, raw sewage leaking from upstairs units onto dinner tables and beds, electrical wiring so dangerous fire marshals condemned 3 of his buildings. And yet families still lived there because they had nowhere else to go. And Marcus? He had a system. Oh, he was very clever. He targeted single mothers working 2 jobs who couldn't afford big deposits, undocumented immigrants terrified of any official contact, ex-convicts nobody else would rent to, elderly folks on $800 a month, priced out of safe neighborhoods, people who couldn't afford lawyers, couldn't risk losing what little housing they had, and wouldn't dare call code enforcement. His leases? Legal booby traps, microscopic font, every repair shoved onto the tenant, but they weren't allowed to fix anything without his written permission, which, of course, he never gave. Fees for everything, and I mean everything, $75 for paying rent late, $50 for paying rent early, $1,100 for submitting a maintenance request, $115 for reporting pests, $200 for asking a question about the lease. One woman, Shanice Williams, paid her $650 rent on time every month, 6 months straight, and still got hit with $2,400 in fees when she asked for an itemized explanation. He charged her another $100 for the question, and when anyone threatened to report him, go ahead and call them, sweetheart. By the time those idiots show up, you'll already be evicted for lease violations, and good luck finding another place with an eviction on your record. Nobody rents to people with evictions. You'll be living in your car with your kids. And the worst part? In Detroit, that threat was usually true. An eviction can be a life sentence to homelessness or even worse, housing. So there I am on that bench and production is rolling. The video people want their dramatic landlordnance, pat, explosive moments. Big Ray, all that nonsense. They tease the clip, they tell viewers, we'll show you the exact moment when the slumlord mocks Judge Judy. They tell you to like, subscribe, share if you think landlords. who abuse poor families should face consequences. They promise you that what I'm going to reveal about his criminal empire will shock you to your core. But let's get to what mattered to me, the human being sitting across from him. Her name was Tasha Monroe, 34 years old, single mother of 3, nursing assistant at Detroit General Hospital. She walked into my courtroom holding a battered manila folder like it was her lifeline, 14 months of evidence, photos, videos, hospital records. Her hands trembled as she smoothed down a borrowed dress because the only professional outfit she owned had been ruined by mold in her children's bedroom closet. Her youngest 6-year-old Amaya had been hospitalized twice for severe asthma attacks directly tied to the toxic mold in Marcus's property on Gratiot Avenue. The medical bills pushed Tasha so hard she had to choose between medication for her daughter and groceries for her sons. She had moved into that place out of sheer desperation, evicted from a previous apartment when her hours were cut, given exactly 11 days to find housing before she and 3 kids were on the street. Regular landlords wanted 3 months before move-in last deposit, $3,900 just to get keys to the cheapest two-bedroom. She had $1,200 saved, earmarked for her oldest son's community college. Then she saw Marcus's ad, "Move in today, no credit check, only $500 deposit." Looked decent from the outside, brick duplex, not great but not a war zone, and Marcus. Charming, tight ship. I take care of my tenants like family. She signed that lease the same afternoon because her children needed beds, not a couch. The nightmare started within a week. No heat. November, 19 degrees. 3 days, 17 calls, voicemails getting more and more desperate as her children shivered under every blanket she owned when he finally called back. "Heat's not included in your rent, sweetheart. You want heat? That's your utility. Check your lease." But the lease did include heat, paragraph 14, 16-page document. When she pointed that out, the mask slipped. "You calling me a liar? That's lease violation number 1, 2 more and you're out." Then he hung up. The heat got fixed 6 days later because her sister paid a private heating contractor $340. Tasha deducted it from the next month's rent, receipts attached. Everything clean, everything documented. Marcus slapped her with a $500 unauthorized rent modification fee and threatened immediate eviction. Over the months, the property decayed. Mold in the bathroom, then in the kids' closet, destroying clothes and school supplies. She documented everything: photos, certified letters, detailed notes. His pattern never changed: ignore, accuse her of lying, then threaten eviction. When Amaya's lips turned blue and that child was rushed to the ER struggling to breathe for the second time. That's when something inside Tasha snapped. She sent a flash drive to my producers. 247 photographs, 14 videos, hospital records, a timeline of every violation, every threat. What she didn't know? By then, I had already started digging. This was never just another tenant dispute to me. It was the match waiting for a strike. The day of the hearing, the courtroom felt normal on the surface. Audience buzzing, cameras checked, my bailiff in place. I was reviewing my notes with the focus that has kept me on television for decades. Nobody in that room had any idea they were about to watch something that would define courtroom TV for a generation. Marcus came in first, had to turn sideways to get through the doors, smirked like he owned the place, didn't even look at Tasha, sat down, chair complaining under his weight, cheap suit stretched to the breaking point. I started the proceeding the way I always do: no nonsense. Tasha testified first, quiet, dignified, voice cracking sometimes, but she stayed focused. She walked me through her work schedule: 60 hours a week caring for other people's sick loved ones, the maintenance requests, the mold photos, the records, her 6-year-old gasping for air. She told me about holding that little girl, lips turning blue, waiting for an ambulance, not as a plea for pity, but as explanation, why she'd finally found the courage to fight. "I just wanted him to fix the mold," she whispered. "My baby couldn't breathe in that apartment." I watched Marcus while she talked. You learn a lot watching. He rolled his eyes so hard I thought he'd strained something. Smirked when she described the hospitalization, like her pain was a performance, sighed loudly, over and over, like all this suffering was an inconvenience, that contempt. I saw every second of it. My expression started to harden. Regular viewers know that look: the storm gathering. When it was his turn, he didn't even wait to be fully invited. He barreled in, "Your Honor, this is a very simple case of a professional victim trying to get out of paying rent she owes." Professional victim. He waved a hand at Tasha like she was a piece of trash. Miss Monroe is what we call in the rental business a problem tenant, always complaining, always making excuses, always looking for a handout. Then he pulled out his little folder with a flourish, like he was about to teach me Property Law 101, lecturing me about rental law, management, tenant responsibilities as if I'd never read a contract before. He actually said, with that same dripping condescension, "Honestly, I don't see what her sob story about her sick kid has to do with contract law. This is a business transaction, and emotions don't change the legal obligations. If she can't afford to rent a decent place, maybe she should have thought about that before having 3 kids she can't support." The audience gasped. Of course, they did. Even through the monitors, you could feel the ugliness in that remark. Tasha tried to respond just a few words, and he talked right over her. "Please, I'm trying to explain reality here." That was enough. "Mr. Sullivan," I said, "she is allowed to speak in this courtroom. You will wait your turn." He sighed even louder. "Fine, whatever." Like a teenage brat being told to put down a video game. The tension was climbing. I began to question his maintenance efforts, asked for concrete evidence of repairs he claimed to have made. Suddenly, he wasn't so smooth, shuffling papers, blaming record-keeping difficulties, timing issues, the same dance he'd probably done with inspectors for years. Then Tasha spoke again, calm, but you could hear the pain. "Your Honor, I just wanted safe housing for my children. I worked 60 hours a week as a nursing assistant, taking care of other people's sick family members, and I came home every night to mold so thick my daughter couldn't breathe. I begged him for help, and he called me a complainer. And then it happened the moment the internet turned into a bonfire." Marcus laughed, out loud, mocking, loud enough to echo. "Oh, please," he said, shaking with laughter. "Here we go with the poor single mother routine. Everyone who doesn't want to pay rent suddenly becomes a victim with a sob story." He smirked straight at the camera like he was sharing a joke with America. "Lady, you signed a lease. You knew what you were getting. If you can't afford a place, don't have 3 kids you can't take care of." The room didn't just go silent. It shifted. It felt like the sound itself backed away. Tasha's face registered shock, then hurt, then a controlled, steady anger. The audience froze, mouths open. My bailiff took a step forward out of instinct. Inside me, the temperature dropped, my face hardened, my eyes locked on him, and when I spoke, my voice went into that quiet register I reserve for the truly outrageous. "Mr. Sullivan, did you just mock this woman for having children she can't afford while you've been collecting rent for housing that is literally poisoning those children?" He still didn't understand how far over the line he was. He doubled down. "I'm just being honest, Your Honor. These professional victims always play the kid card to avoid responsibility. If her daughter's got asthma, that's genetics, not my problem. Let me tell you something." The audacity of a man like that lecturing anyone about responsibility while he profits off conditions that harm children is breathtaking. I leaned forward slowly. "No rush, no theatrics, just precision. Let me tell you something about responsibility, Mr. Sullivan, and I want you to listen very carefully. Because what I'm about to reveal is going to change your life forever." I reached for a thick manila folder on my bench. He hadn't even noticed it while he was busy performing for the cameras. When your case came across my desk, I told him something about it felt familiar. So I did what I always do with landlords who exploit the desperate. I made some calls. I opened the folder, pulled out the first document, held it up for the cameras. "Mr. Marcus Raymond Sullivan, also known as Big Ray, also known as Marcus Williams, also known as Ray Montgomery. You've been using different names and shell companies to hide your rental empire for 23 years, haven't you?" I watched the colored rain from his face. "In those 23 years, you've owned 112 properties across Detroit, Flint, and Saginaw. You've had 47 housing code violations, 8 citations for illegal evictions. You've been sued by tenants 63 times, and yet you've managed to avoid serious consequences using shell corporations, settling cases quietly, and targeting tenants too poor or too scared to fight back. Isn't that right?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish. Nothing came out. The arrogance was evaporating right in front of the cameras. I wasn't finished. I pulled out another document, state seal on the top. This is a report from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Do you know what it says, Mr. Sullivan? He sat there, sweating, knuckles white on the table. This report documents that 7 children have been hospitalized for lead poisoning, toxic mold exposure, and carbon monoxide poisoning while living in your properties over the past 5 years. 7 children, Mr. Sullivan, 7 families who trusted you to provide safe housing, and instead got poison. The audience gasped. People covered their mouths. Tasha's eyes filled. Tears streamed down her face as she realized Amaya was one of many, and I kept going because the truth mattered. But wait, there's more, I said. I pulled out another stack of papers. You've been collecting Section 8 housing vouchers from the federal government for properties that don't meet basic habitability standards. That is federal fraud. You've been stealing taxpayer money meant to house the poorest families in America while giving them apartments that are literally killing their children. He tried to interrupt, voice cracking now. Your Honor, those reports are exaggerated. Tenants always blame landlords for their own poor housekeeping and lifestyle choices. If their kids are sick, maybe they should stop smoking or clean better, or my gavel came down like a thunderclap. How dare you? How dare you sit in my courtroom and blame poor mothers for mold growing through walls because you refuse to fix roof leaks? How dare you blame children for lead poisoning from paint you know is toxic but won't remove because it costs money? The courtroom erupted into applause. During proceedings, that's highly unusual. Did I stop it? No, even my bailiff just stood there, caught up in what we were all watching. I pointed straight at him, a moment that would be screenshotted 1,000,000 times. You are not a landlord, Mr. Sullivan. You are a predator. You target the most vulnerable people in society. Single mothers who can't afford lawyers, immigrants who fear authorities, elderly people on fixed incomes. You exploit their desperation for profit while their children suffer. You weaponize the legal system to threaten them into silence. You use shell corporations to hide your assets and avoid accountability. You are everything that is wrong with predatory capitalism in this country. He was crumbling right there, and every camera caught it. Then I shifted from fury to pure judicial authority. Here is my ruling, and I want you to understand that this is just the beginning of your legal troubles, Mr. Sullivan. I brought the gavel down with finality. You will pay Miss Monroe her full security deposit of $500. You will reimburse her for all medical expenses related to her daughter's mold-induced asthma for $200. You will pay 6 months of rent differential, the difference between what she would have paid for safe housing and what she paid you for a toxic apartment, $900. And you will pay punitive damages for emotional distress and intentional negligence in the amount of $10,000, total judgment, 18600. The audience rose. A full standing ovation. Tasha sank into her chair, sobbing with relief. That money meant survival for her family. But I was not done. I raised my hand. The room went quiet. Furthermore, Mr. Sullivan, I am forwarding this case and all evidence to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development for federal investigation into housing fraud. I am also forwarding it to the Michigan Attorney General's Office for criminal prosecution related to child endangerment, fraud, and racketeering under state law, and I am forwarding it to the Detroit Housing Commission to begin emergency inspections of all 47 properties you currently own. His face turned from red to ghostly gray. Your Honor, please, he stammered. I have a business to run. I have expenses. This will bankrupt me. I can't possibly afford. I cut him off. You can't afford it? You've been collecting millions in rent from families living in conditions you wouldn't house animals in. You drive a Mercedes class. You own a vacation home in Florida. You have the money, Mr. Sullivan. You just prefer spending it on yourself rather than on keeping children safe. The room went silent again. Then I said what became the most quoted passage from that entire viral moment. Let me tell you something about poverty and responsibility that you clearly don't understand. Miss Monroe works 60 hours a week taking care of sick people in a hospital. She comes home exhausted and still finds the energy to be a mother to 3 children. She pays her rent on time despite making $12 an hour. She budgets every penny to keep her family fed and clothed. And you have the audacity to call her irresponsible while you collect rent on apartments that are poisoning children. The moral bankruptcy of your position is staggering. Then I did something I rarely do. I stood up. When I stand, that means something has gone beyond a simple dispute. It has entered the realm of moral imperative. This case represents everything wrong with how we treat the poorest and most vulnerable members of our society. We allow predators like you to exploit their desperation because they don't have the resources to fight back. But today, Mr. Sullivan, you picked the wrong tenant. Today, you met someone who had the courage to stand up to you. And today, your decades of getting away with abuse end in my courtroom. Case closed. Get out. The gavel strike shook more than the wood. It shook something in the people watching. Within 2 hours of airing, that clip detonated across social media. Twitter Slumler Justice 2 million tweets, Facebook 67 million views in 24 hours, tenants sharing their own stories, TikTok over 2,000 reaction videos, side-by-side edits of his arrogant entrance against his broken exit, Reddit 23 subreddits. Dissecting every moment, every word, YouTube 85 million views in a week, the most watched courtroom clip in internet history. Tenant rights organizations praised the handling of the case. Advocacy groups started asking me to speak about predatory landlords. And in the real world, the hammer came down. Within 72 hours. Federal housing investigators were inside all 47 of his properties. 31 condemned and evacuated immediately. His assets frozen while criminal investigations advanced. The Michigan Attorney General announced charges: racketeering, fraud, child endangerment, looking at up to 20 years in federal prison. His Mercedes, repossessed Florida vacation home, seized as proceeds of criminal enterprise. Over 200 former tenants came forward for a class action lawsuit. He wanted fame, he got infamy. People online told viewers, if this story of justice and a destroyed slumlord moves you, subscribe, share it, comment what you think should happen to landlords who put profits over children's lives. And they were right about one thing: people like Tasha are fighting these battles every single day. They deserve protection from predators. Like Big Ray, 3 months later, an envelope from Detroit landed on my desk at the production office. Handwritten address. I opened it. Dear Judge Judy, it began. My name is Tasha Monroe, and I don't even know how to put into words what you did for me and my children. I sat in my office alone and read every single line. She told me things no camera captured. Amaya hadn't had a single asthma attack in 3 months since moving to a new place with working heat and clean walls. Her boys stopped having nightmares about being thrown out. The $18,600 allowed her to pay off medical debt and, for the first time ever, start saving money. But the part that hit me in the gut? You showed my children that powerful people can't just do whatever they want to poor families, she wrote. You showed them that justice is real. My oldest son wants to be a lawyer now because of you. He wants to help people like us who can't afford to fight back. I picked up the phone. I didn't dictate a form letter. I called her. We talked for 45 minutes about life, motherhood, and what it means when you have power and other people don't. Then I did something I'd never done in my television career. I established the Tasha Monroe Tenant Rights Scholarship, a full legal education fund for her oldest son, specifically to help train the next generation of lawyers to fight predatory landlords. Because justice isn't just about one verdict. It's about building people who can keep fighting once the cameras are off. When reporters asked why this case hit me so deeply, I told them the truth. I've seen thousands of cases involving people who lie, cheat, and manipulate for petty reasons, but Marcus Sullivan represented something darker. He built an empire on the suffering of children and felt entitled to continue without consequences. That kind of evil doesn't deserve mercy. It deserves exposure, and he got it. His fall was complete. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for housing fraud, racketeering, child endangerment. His rental empire was dismantled and sold. The proceeds went into a victim compensation fund for 247 families. And here's the poetic part: he who made families fear homelessness now lives in an 8x10 cell with black mold in the corners and broken heat that leaves him shivering through Michigan winters. People noticed the irony. Meanwhile, Tasha didn't disappear. She became a tenant rights advocate, speaking at housing commission meetings, helping other families document abuse. Her viral moment gave her a platform, and she used it so fewer families would endure what she did. Those 4 minutes in my courtroom became more than a viral clip. They became a catalyst. 15 states strengthened tenant protection laws, citing this case as evidence of how predators exploit loopholes. Detroit implemented mandatory annual inspections for all rental properties. Thousands of tenants, long silent, found the courage to speak up knowing someone out there would listen, would fight. 6 months after the episode aired, a documentary filmmaker approached my team. He'd been interviewing former tenants of Marcus's properties. 43 families agreed to tell their stories on camera, stories almost identical to Tasha's. An elderly veteran living through a whole winter without heat while his calls were ignored. A pregnant woman giving birth prematurely after carbon monoxide exposure from a furnace Marcus refused to fix. A family of 5 evicted on Christmas Eve for complaining about rats. The most powerful scene? All 43 families gathered in a Detroit community center, watching my takedown of Marcus on a big screen. Grown men crying when I called him a predator. Mothers embracing when the judgment hit. Children cheering when he was sentenced. In the center sat Tasha, hearing story after story that mirrored her own and realizing that her courage had helped free all of them. One woman stood up during the screening, tears running down her face, and said, looking straight into the camera, "We were invisible until Tasha made us visible." That line became the title of the documentary. It premiered at Tribeca, won social justice awards, and became required viewing in law schools across the country. Future attorneys watched it to understand the human cost of housing inequality and the power of one person's courage to force systemic change. I went to the premiere. When they asked what I hoped people would take away from the Marcus Sullivan case, I answered plainly, I hope people understand that justice isn't just about courtrooms and verdicts. It's about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. It's about refusing to look away from suffering, even when it would be easier to ignore it. And it's about remembering that every case, every plaintiff, every defendant represents a real human being whose life will be changed by the decisions we make. Tasha Monroe was brave enough to fight. I was privileged enough to help. But the real heroes are the people watching who decide that what happened to her will never happen to anyone else on their watch. That's the story. That's exactly what happened. And let me tell you something, people. As long as I'm on that bench, real or metaphorical, if you build your empire on the backs of the desperate and the bodies of children, sooner or later, you're going to sit in front of someone like me. And when that day comes, you'd better be ready for consequences.